Introduce Mr. Cory Poe, who is the CLS program administrator and director for the Egypt program. He's also a study abroad coordinator at the University of Utah. Very lucky to have him here wearing both hats. And although I think we worked out the parking situation, you don't need a visa to get onto campus from the University of Utah. We're trying to normalize relations with our friends to the north. So, but you've come to the right place, and we're glad to see you. In case you don't know, there are a number of events that go on, not just here in the Kennedy Center, but across campus. If you haven't been to the website for the Office of Prestigious Scholarships, you should. There's a lot of money on the table to help you study foreign languages, to help you go around the world, and the office exists just for that purpose. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't been to the website, please spend some time after the session with the Office of Prestigious Scholarships at BYU. Easy to Google, and you can find it, and look through other opportunities in addition to this one today. Just a couple of other announcements I'll let you know before I introduce Casey. Monday is the 22nd Annual International Society Conference. For those of you who might be interested, it's a group of Latter-day Saint international professionals. It meets once a year, and it has a network of several thousand LDS professionals all around the world. You've probably seen the posters around. This Monday, the conference will be focusing on the erosion of religious liberty impact on the international church. It will be held from 8:30 until 4 p.m. in the Hinckley Assembly Hall. Casey's president, President Mike Young, will actually receive the International Service Award for his work on human rights and religious freedom around the world. That will be in the morning. President Samuelson will kick that off. So again, 8:30 a.m. to 4 in the Hinckley Center. For those of you who are here looking for career and graduate school options and ways to fund that, next Tuesday at 3 p.m. in this room, we'll welcome Fred Axelgard, who's a vice president of Middle East Business Development with General Dynamics. Fred's a graduate of BYU, also received his PhD in philosophy from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. And he'll be talking about those options that are available, again, next Tuesday at 3 o'clock in this room. Our Wednesday lecture series will host Deborah Majid, who's an associate professor at Beloit College. She'll be speaking on the law and the women, protection of rights for Muslim women in polygyny, next Wednesday at noon. And then two more things. Next Wednesday from 1:30 until 7, Islam in the West, a conference that we're co-sponsoring with the Wheatley Institution. We'll be hosting in particular Khaled Abu al-Fadl, professor of international law at UCLA School of Law, along with a number of other faculty and visitors and some BYU faculty. Will be discussing Islam in the West from various perspectives with a panel at 1:30, a panel at 3:30, and the keynote at 7:30 p.m., all in the Hinckley Center. Overlapping with that, for those who are interested in the Foreign Service, a 2 p.m. workshop next Wednesday here in this room with Amy Hyatt. She is the diplomat in residence that covers the Intermountain West. So she is coming to visit Utah universities and will be at BYU next Wednesday. So 2 p.m. if you're thinking about a career in diplomacy. For those who are a little bit further along, you've taken the written exam and you're looking to how do you pass the oral exam, 4 p.m. In this room as well. So that's a mouthful. I know it's a lot of announcements, but I'll also point out, in case you don't know, that all these events are online. You can follow them on Twitter, Facebook. You can sign up for an RSS feed. You can sign up for the listserv and receive an email once a month. Or you can just go to our website at kennedy.byu.edu, where all these flyers and PDFs are all available. Sometimes a number of the career events slip in under the radar, so you may not hear about it. I know how busy you are. So whatever way you prefer to find out about things, there's lots of great opportunities to help you in furthering your international career, finding money, and preparing for the next step after graduation. Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Cory Poe. As I mentioned, he's the Critical Language Scholarship Program Administrator for Egypt. He's also the Coordinator of Study Abroad at the University of Utah. You're going to learn today about this scholarship, so I won't talk about that in addition, but I want to tell you a little bit about Casey. He coordinates study abroad programs and exchanges in the Middle East, Africa, and Spanish language programs in Latin America and Spain, as well as administers this CLS program in Alexandria, Egypt. Prior to working at the University of Utah, Poe worked as a congressional intern in Washington, D.C. Good plug for those of you who want to do the Washington seminar. And as a Spanish interpreter for various organizations and a standardized testing instructor for Kaplan Test Prep. That tells you how smart he is. In 2009, he was a critical language scholar in advanced Arabic in Alexandria. His studies have taken him to Austria, New Zealand, Mexico, and Spain, and he's volunteered in Poland and Costa Rica. He's a native of Knoxville, Tennessee. He received a BA in Spanish from, is it Berea? Berea College, and an MA in Diplomacy and International Commerce from the University of Kentucky. Some of you may have seen, we had the Dean of the International Relations Program in Kentucky, the Patterson School, right, who was just here last fall, I believe.
Yeah, I drove him here.
Yeah, exactly. That's when I met Casey. So for those of you looking for interesting graduate opportunities, it's a great program. You can also ask Ms. Poe about that. He studied Arabic at the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Arabic Immersion Program and at the American University in Cairo's Arabic Language Institute. So not only does he have extensive information for you on this program, but he's very well connected into the world of international relations, international studies, language studies, Middle East studies, and as you can see, he's a good person to know. Today I'll be talking about Need to Know, the Critical Language Scholarship Program. Please join me in welcoming Casey Poe.
Wow, thanks, Cory. This is the first time somebody's ever said I'm a good person to know. I always told Cory I think he should be on the radio. He'd be a good sports announcer. I'd like this to be more of a conversation between us than a presentation because I suspect that many of you are already pretty savvy in terms of international studies and international education, especially since you're already here at the Kennedy Center and you're already here at BYU. That kind of clues me into that you probably know a lot more than some of the students that maybe I deal with on a daily basis. So I'm going to go through the presentation quickly, and then I'd like to spend most of the time answering your questions about CLS and about whatever you happen to be interested in. This is a standardized presentation. This is provided to me by the Council of American Overseas Research Centers who funds the program, so it's fairly bland. So we'll go through it quickly because it has the general information that you can find out on your own, and then after that we'll talk about questions and what you particularly are interested in doing. So these are federally funded programs, and because they're appropriated by Congress, they are funded directly out of an appropriation bill from the United States Congress. We fund 575 awards approximately every year. I run the program, and I'll actually give you an update about this. Oh, thank you. That's very nice. Oh, excellent. So I run the program in Alexandria, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what's happening in Egypt, because some of you might be curious about that too, since you probably followed the news recently and know what's going on there. 185 of those awards are for Arabic, which is the one of the 6 sites that I run. There's 6 sites in Arabic: Cairo, Alexandria, Amman, Jordan, Oman, Tangiers, and Tunis are the 6 sites in Arabic. It's been around since 2006. I've been involved since 2009, so this will be my 3rd year working in the CLS program. So we've been around about half the time, and we're pretty proud of that association, considering we weren't one of the very first groups to come along. And you guys are the target group, so there's nothing more to say about that, I don't think. You do have to be a U.S. citizen to be eligible for this program. That's because it's provided for by federal money. So it's taxpayer dollars, which means you have to be a potential taxpayer to take part in the program, and you have to also be currently enrolled. Now, that only means you have to be currently enrolled at the time of application. You don't have to be enrolled when you actually leave. So that means graduating seniors can qualify for this too, as well as people finishing graduate school, coming out of graduate school. Some programs require previous language study, and basically you can't be an incoming freshman. So there's not too many other qualifications, and you don't have to have any specific experience abroad. Everything is included, and I mean everything, in addition to the fact that you get a cash stipend. The cash stipends vary from site to site depending on cost of living in each place, but everything's paid for. Sometimes students go home with money, depending on how frugal they are. You're not really supposed to go home with money, but students do. They figure out ways to save money and come home with some money. Everything else is taken care of. This program is different than, say, for instance, like the NCEP scholarships or a Gilman scholarship. It is not a check that you receive in your hand. It is a program that's already set up, and you go to the program and you take part in it. It's a group program, and you're with about 30 other American students who are also taking part in the same program. So you don't ever really handle the money except for your personal stipend. So it makes it different than a lot of other federal scholarships where you submit the proposal and they give you a check to fund it. They're group-based intensive language programs. These are the countries that they've been in, but I'm going to give you an update on Egypt specifically, because for 2011, there is no Egypt. And I think I can say that officially without getting in any trouble. These are the languages that have prerequisites, or some do and some don't. So for my language, Arabic, that I work in, you have to have at least 1 year of Arabic to qualify to participate in the program. So when it says beginning, that means you don't need any prior study. Intermediate, you have to have 2 years of college level study, or advanced, 3 years of college study. Those are the language levels. Again, I mentioned the language requirements. Arabic and Persian is a little bit higher than the others. And then Chinese, Japanese, and Russian require quite a bit. So let me back up and clarify what I'm saying by that. These languages essentially require no previous study. Okay? If you haven't ever studied these languages, you can go on a program. These 2 languages require 1 year, and these 3 languages require at least 2 years. Okay, so if you're studying Chinese, Japanese, and Russian, you have to have done it for at least 2 years to qualify. Question over.
When it says minimum 2 years of college level study or equivalent, I'm assuming that mission type service would count towards that.
I don't know. I guess that you'd probably have to take a proficiency exam of some kind, if there's any way you could do that, yeah.
I actually have another question about that. When they say 2 years, do they mean like the 200 level classes, or specifically you have to have 2 actual years in college?
Yeah, well, so for instance, say you tested into, we call it, at the University of Utah, we call it 2020, which is 3rd semester Russian. If you tested into 3rd semester Russian and you took 3rd and 4th semester Russian, you'd be qualified to go. Because that's considered equivalent, because you've tested into it.
Between the beginning, intermediate, and advanced levels, are the awards evenly distributed between those, or?
Actually, I would say no. From the numbers I've seen, the numbers weigh heavily towards beginning and intermediate. There's less advanced awards because, well, one, there's less applicants at the advanced levels for most programs. So if you're in the advanced level in some languages, like the Indic languages, if you're in the advanced level in Bengali, for instance, there might only be 10 applicants nationwide because nobody has advanced proficiency in Bengali.
If you're already advanced in one of these languages, would you recommend doing the program in that language or starting in different?
Well, to be honest, if you are beyond what you would consider 4th year college level, you won't get a benefit out of CLS. It only really works for people up to about 4th year. We've had students in my program who have been beyond 4th year, and it's been a little too easy for them because it's not really designed to go beyond 4 years of college study. If you feel that you're behind that, if you may be coming up on your 4th year, I would still recommend you apply at the advanced level because I think you'd get some benefit out of that. So, yeah, if you're into 5th year and above in any particular language, probably CLS is already too easy for you. You will want to go do one on your own, immersion program on your own or something like that. 7 to 10 weeks. My program is 8 weeks. It includes a whole bunch of additional stuff in addition to classes. You have to be in class at least 20 hours a week, and the State Department mandates that it's exactly 16, I'm going back to Arabic again, but in Arabic it's exactly 16 hours of modern standard Arabic and 4 hours of the local dialect. Exactly. Has to be exactly that. Cultural excursions are included. There's a 7-day limit, so we take students on exactly 7 days of cultural excursions because we used to do more and they put a limit on us. There's movies, roundtables, guest speakers. We tend to lean towards something called language socialization, which is something unique that no other program so far that I'm aware of does, where every Monday, in our case, every Monday night you have a 2 to 3 hour project where you go out with a local, there's a group of 4 people, and you have a specific task. So for instance, one of the ones that we had last year that was really effective is we had a specific mosque, and you had to find that mosque and find an imam and talk to that imam and ask him 3 questions in Arabic and bring the responses back. And you'd go in a small group of 4 people with a guide. We do 6 or 7 of those different things, and we do them for those groups on a rotating basis every Monday in Alexandria's case, so that the idea is that if you were dropped into Egypt with no language skills, what would be some things that you absolutely would need or would be highly interested in accomplishing without having ever been there? Because as you're probably all aware, language is more than just words. It's also understanding a cultural situation in which you have to actually use those words, and you'd be surprised until you've had to actually do it once or twice. You might think you know the words that you need to know, and you don't. So we have those, and that's kind of unique. We have conversation partners, so everybody has 30 to 45 minutes a day of direct speaking practice, We do those, at least in Arabic, we do them 2 days in Modern Standard and 2 days in the colloquial dialect, which in Egypt obviously is Egyptian. So that a week you're getting about 2 hours of direct practice. And we found that most students who come to our program may have not had 2 hours of actual direct speaking practice in their entire life in a lot of cases. And that's no joke. They've studied the language for 2-3 years. They've never spoken it for longer than 3 minutes at a time. And now they have to speak it for 30 minutes a day in front, just one-on-one with the person. So that's tremendous for oral proficiency. A question here.
Now, when you're saying one-on-one with a person, is that a native speaker?
Yeah, they're always native speakers. Yeah. It would cost us more actually to pay someone who wasn't a native speaker, but that's beside the point. In some cases, there's a language pledge. We don't, in Alexandria, we don't enforce the language pledge because you're literally surrounded by Arabic so much that it's embarrassing to speak English in public, at least around the Egyptians, because there's so many Egyptians at all times around, and you feel like an outsider if you start speaking English all the time. So we don't have anybody sign anything. We just we just use like some sort of moral enforcement. I don't know, but it works. It's worked so far, and I do that by I only speak to the staff in Arabic, so the students only hear me speaking English if we have something that absolutely has to be done in English, and so far that's very effective. It's actually what they recommend we do, because most cases enforcing a language pledge backfires. People grow very recalcitrant because they feel when Big Brother is watching them, and we don't monitor students in their dorms to see if they're speaking the language or not, while they're home at night. So, please only apply for one language. Don't select a country. You can't select a country. It's not an option. It used to be an option. You could select country preferences, and they don't allow students to do that. You just have to select a language, which means in the case of Arabic, you could be going up to 6 different countries, and you have to be willing to go to any one of those countries. They ask for transcripts and letters of reference. You'll see that online when you get there, or this is taking longer than I thought. So here are the essays, 2 short answers. How did you become interested in the target language? How will you continue your language study? 2 longer questions. How is proficiency in the target language critical to your academic and professional goals, and how have you dealt with challenging living situations? The last one is very important because we do have a lot of students, genuinely, who come in with pretty strong language skills, but almost nil in terms of cultural adjustment or flexibility abroad, especially in a place like Egypt. And it almost always becomes a fairly serious issue with a couple of students who just have struggled to adjust to the culture, especially in a place like Egypt that is so very different than what most people are accustomed to. The 2-tiered review process is extensive, to be honest. It's reviewed by a panel of people that we actually nominate, program directors and other people involved in CLS, so we nominate these readers, us and others, but there's probably, 100 of them nationwide, and most of them are academics at universities. They read these, they cut them down by a third, and then they get read again and cut down by a third, and then there's a panel who makes the final decisions, and they recommend those people to the State Department. So there's 2 levels to go through. In contrast to a lot of these federal awards, there's no service requirement, but they do expect you in some way to continue your language studies, which probably won't be hard for you to demonstrate here. I don't think at BYU. At the University of Utah, it's harder to demonstrate that. But I think there's probably plenty of opportunities to continue practicing the language here, even if it's just with other fellow students. I'm guessing you're here because you already know why you want to apply, so I probably wouldn't need to tell you that. But it's intensive. The results we've been able to produce so far, at least in Arabic, show that students have been able to improve almost 2 full years of proficiency, oral proficiency, in 2 months, which is because we're really using a very unique, and in fact, it's actually proprietary language integration strategy that was developed at Berkeley that's extremely cutting edge, and it's not like any other language program or most other language programs you've ever been to. It's modeled partially on CASA, which is the University of Texas program, and the American University in Cairo, but it's also got other new things in it, and one of those things is that we have students carry iPod Touches that have vocabulary drills on them, and they're required to carry these even on excursions so that they're practicing their vocabulary while they're out. So, and you don't get to keep it. Sorry, you have to turn it back in. Do you have a question?
No, it's boring.
Yeah. There are some additional funding opportunities that you may or may not be aware of. One I'll highlight is this Critical Language Enhancement Award. That's actually a Fulbright grant. So the CLEA, which is what they call it, provides up to 6 months of intensive critical language training before or concurrent with the regular Fulbright grant period. So it's like an add-on to a Fulbright. The chances of you getting a Fulbright are much higher if you do a CLS, if you get a CLS, because it's funded by the same people. This is all the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, the State Department. So they fund Fulbright, Nestle Y, Gilman, and CLS. All that money comes from the same place. So ultimately, everybody that works in this program answers to the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, although we don't see them but about twice a year. So that's the website, if you guys are interested in going and seeing some more about it. And with that in mind, I'll tell you about the developments that I think I think it's okay because it's become pretty much official. I'm sure you guys were probably watching the news around January 26th, January 25th, 26th. So the revolution has prevented us from being able to go to Egypt this year because they closed off both Egypt sites. So we've had to move those 2 sites to Morocco. So at least one of those sites is going to Fez, and they just sent out confirmations just today for the scholars that are going to be going to Fez. So it looks like I'll be running a program in Fez this year instead of Alexandria, which is where I'd always been in the past. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an interesting new challenge, but we anticipate that pending the situation in Egypt, we will be returning to Egypt. I mean, we have a heavy investment in Egypt, in fact, because 60 out of the 185 students in Arabic have, even more actually, maybe 65, 70 out of the 185 have always gone to Egypt because we have 2 sites, Cairo and Alexandria. So this will most likely be a one-off year, inshallah, pending the outcome of the elections in September, which will determine probably the political situation when we have to restart the planning cycle again next November at Mesa. So anyway, we've asked applicants for this year to be patient with us because obviously, as you're all aware, there have been some very significant developments in the Middle East in the last 6 months that no one would have ever anticipated at the end of the CLS program last August. So, question in the back.
I just had a kind of an overall question. You said that previous language experience and abroad experience, service and otherwise, wasn't required, but how does that affect the application process in terms of eligibility?
Yeah, so you do have to have previous language experience in those languages I mentioned, Persian, Arabic, Japanese, Chinese.
In terms of a beginning, for example, other languages, like you said you had Spanish before, if someone knows several other languages.
Oh, I'm sure it'll make your application stronger. You have to submit a letter of recommendation anyway, and that letter of recommendation is generally best if it comes from a language professor. So obviously you're ahead of someone who doesn't have a language, a recommendation from a language professor. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it's. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because you have to be able to answer those questions, and people that don't have that kind of experience really can't answer them, not effectively anyway. Question.
Along those lines, what are a few things that are going to make the difference between an adequate applicant and a really strong applicant?
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot, and students who come into my office ask me about that. And the advice I guess I've tried to give people is, okay, so you figure that we get about, for CLS programs generally, we get about 5,500 applications annually for about 575 spots. So a lot of them look really the same. Now, I should tell you, I don't read them. They don't, in fact, let me read them because it's a conflict of interest. But a lot of them sound really similar. So my advice generally has been to students to be very specific about your personal goals and don't be afraid to sound even a little arrogant if necessary. I don't mean to say arrogant, but be specific. Don't say things like, I want to help the world, or I want to, work with children, poor children, or so. You have to be really specific about what you really want to do, as well as I would recommend as brief as possible because, again, this is read by 3 people and they are reading hundreds of applications. And then third, I would say, because you're going through a 3-tiered process, is be careful about how you word certain things. And I'll give you an example. Try to avoid saying things like, I really want to get to know the natives, because you could highly offend somebody inadvertently, if you said something like that, which might seem totally, innocent. Well, yeah, I want to get to know native speakers. Of course, that makes sense. But sometimes the wording can be sensitive, and you have to think about what types of people are reading it and the fact that you have to get through 3 rounds of it. So my advice has always been be very specific, be brief, and avoid blunders if possible in the way that you craft it politically speaking. And then I guess the other thing was successful applicants have told me that some of them have used statistics in their essays. I didn't use statistics, but they would say things like, did you know that only 0.01% of study abroad students study in the Middle East, or something like that, which is actually true. It's a very small percentage. And we have a need of, the State Department estimates we needed these many Arabic speakers, and we just short these many Arabic speakers. I'd keep that brief, but if it relates to your specific goals, I think that only strengthens your argument because of, again, specificity. I think the one thing you just really have to avoid is just sounding like every other essay, which kind of goes something like, I've always been interested in languages because I had a neighbor who was from China, and we used to play ball together in the yard. And ever since then, I've enjoyed watching Chinese movies and TV. And I went to China once on vacation with my parents, and I really want to do international development work related to China. Sounds like a pretty decent essay, really, but a lot of the essays sound like that. So yeah, if you can be very specific, and I mean stuff like, I want to be a consular officer in Tunis working with refugees from Libya who fled the civil war in the spring of 2011, or something like that, or something very specific. I think that probably makes you a lot more successful applicant. The other thing that helps is geographical distribution, because Congress funds it. They want someone from literally every single state. So that's good for you guys because you're at the best languages university in the state. Now, if you were in the medical field or something, I might say, well, that's the University of Utah. But in this field, this is the best school in the state. So you already have a leg up because someone from Utah will go, guaranteed. Someone will go from Utah. And probably half a dozen or so will go from Utah. And about 80% of them will probably come from here. And we'll probably get 1 or 2 up at the U. So that's something to think about too.
Are there languages that are more competitive than others? Maybe Arabic?
Very, very much so. Arabic is much, much more competitive than most of the others. And I can't give you the exact numbers, but we get, our acceptance rate's like 1 in 12 or 1 in 13 or something for Arabic, whereas Bengali is much lower. It's like 1 in 4. The easier ones, I hate to say easier, they've all become competitive, but I think the Indic languages, especially Bengali and there's also, I believe there is Punjabi, thank you. Punjabi are probably 2 of the more easy ones to get into, especially if you have advanced proficiency or even intermediate proficiency. Yeah.
How would you say the competition is for like Japanese or Chinese?
Chinese is probably one of the hardest. Japanese, I would put right in the middle. I'm just guessing based on number of applications that I've seen, because we get the application statistics every year. And I don't remember exactly what they are in relation to the acceptance rates, but I think China is definitely in the top 3 difficulty, and Japan's probably in the middle of the pack. Do you have a question over here?
Yeah. What are some, good ideas or ways you've seen students show a desire to use their language after the program?
Yeah, well,
That seems to me, for like some of the Indic languages, which I'm more interested in, it seems a little harder to demonstrate an actual...
yeah. What are you going to do when you get back with it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the thing I've recommended to students at the University of Utah, which is different than here because you guys have different opportunities than they do at Utah, is we have a exchange, I don't know what a language exchange program. So where you can get paired up with a native speaker of a language on campus, somebody that's already there who's interested in improving their English. And they might not necessarily have to be students of English, they're just students from wherever, and they happen to speak that language that you're studying. I usually recommend that to students. Of course, I recommend to them further study abroad. It's clearly the easiest way to show that. I mean, if you're... Absolutely, I'm sure you have those. Aaron can tell you have those opportunities. So, I mean, if you have a study abroad coming up the year after, I mean, that's a great argument, as to get you kicked off. Because sometimes maybe your school doesn't offer with Punjabi, and that's the case with some applicants. They just they can't get it. We had an applicant in my program when I was a student from North Dakota State in Fargo, and they didn't even have, as far as I know, more than a year or 2 of Arabic at North Dakota State at all. So She was able to justify it by she just lived she just stayed in Egypt and just lived there. She didn't go back to North Dakota. So, yeah. Question over here.
Are you planning on bringing back the Spanish program?
There never was a Spanish program in CLS. No, there never was a Spanish program. Although I personally love Spanish, I'd love to go to Spain if they'd pay for me to do that. You could go to Morocco, and skip on over to Spain, and we'd over after it's over. Question over here.
Is it just a summer program?
Yeah, there's no CLS during the school year.
Okay,
Summer
so
only.
It's just between what, May?
The earliest ones, at least in Arabic, the earliest ones started the last week of May. I think we started May 30 last year, and we were back August 1. That was the dates for my program last year.
And deadlines for application, for example, for summer of 12?
Excellent question. Yeah, you missed the deadline for this summer, which you probably have realized that already. It's November 15th. It's always been November 15th. I don't expect that to change. I mean, I guess it could, but I don't expect it to. Question, how about maybe we'll go front to back, if that's all right.
I just forgot my question. Can you come back to me?
Yeah, sure. Good.
What are the programs like when you're actually there? So then you mentioned something about like homework and vocabulary. So
Mhm.
like, what exactly is that we are going to?
Yeah, so a standard day would be you're in class from probably 9 to 11. You get and that's in Arabic that's modern standard. In other languages it's just whatever. Most languages don't have serious diglossia like Arabic does. There's a small break, then you're in class from 11:30 to lunch, which is at 1:30. One of those hours is going to be colloquial Arabic, at least in our program. Then you have lunch with the locals, the local native speakers that work in the program. Then you have a half hour of structured speaking practice, and then you have a rotating activity. So in our program, if it's a Sunday, it's what we call a mandatory peer outing. You go out we have 26 peers that pair up with all the students. You go out with your peers, you can do anything you want to do, you just have to report on it. Monday, it's language socialization that I mentioned. Tuesday, it's the clubs. And those clubs, we have a workshop at the end of the program where you have to present what you've been working on the clubs. Thursday night's free, Friday night's free, and usually we have at least in our program, we have 2 major excursions which take up 2 of the weekends. So you're gone to Luxor and Aswan for about 5 days in one of our programs, and then you're gone to a place called Siwa, which is about 3 days, 2.5 days or something like that. Now this is the Alexandria program, so I'm sure it varies. And then you're supposed to have 4 hours of homework, but 4 hours of homework is very overwhelming. So we usually don't give students a full 4 hours because it's just more than what people can get done in a night. Question here in the front.
Right. How long before the program begins are applicants informed that they?
Well, we ideally try to tell them, this year we wanted to tell them by the beginning of March, but because of the revolution for Arabic, we just informed them, see what's today? It's Thursday? Yeah, the beginning of this week. So, you know, we hope it to be before the end of February in any given year, but because of the political situation in the Middle East, it's taken longer.
So hypothetically, if someone hadn't had much experience in any of these languages, would they applied, got in, would they have time to take a class before going?
Not if you hadn't already registered. You would never know before spring registration.
Okay.
You'd have to already plan ahead for that because you'd never know in time to register for the spring. Question over here? No, it's okay, please.
Scholarship makes it easier to get other scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of scholarships?
Oh, the ones that were up here, the ones that are from the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. So those include, all the funding that comes from the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, which is Fulbright, Nestle Y, which you don't qualify for because you're already a little too old. That's for high school students. Fulbright, this Critical Language Enhancement Award, and Aaron, help me, the Gilman, because those all come from the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. So any ECA grant, it's easier to get because they've seen, well, we've already given you money, so we want to continue to support your proficiency. We always have returning students. We always have at least 1 or 2 students who have already done CLS once before.
Does it look good on like applications or resumes if you ever want to work for the State Department?
You know, I'm sure it does, but I should caution you about where you want to work in the State Department because I personally have taken the oral exams twice for the Foreign Service, and they do not consider at all your resume when you walk into the oral exam. To get to the oral exam, they look at your resume carefully. But once you're there, it's about your performance on that day. Doesn't matter what languages you have proficiency in. Doesn't matter what you've done in your work career. You have to pass the threshold for the oral exam to get into the Foreign Service. That's a 5.25. And if you don't get a 5.25, it doesn't matter if you were the king of Morocco. You won't get into the Foreign Service. So the process is a little disjointed in terms of that the oral interview itself is just the oral interview. So I usually tell students who come in and ask about it, go practice a couple times. Go take the written exam now, and if you get to orals, because you might have to do it once or twice before you get through it. I've personally done it twice, failed twice. And I run a State Department program, if that tells you anything about what the oral exams are like. And the room, the room full of people is, I mean, I was across the table with a girl who works at UNESCO, who runs, the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and I have no idea if she passed or not, no clue at all. So my advice generally is just practice now before you get out of school, because you got time. You can go take the written exam like in a month. Practice it. If you make it to orals, well, that's just icing on the cake, because if you get in, you really have a hard choice. You drop out of school, join the Foreign Service, I don't know. Chances are you probably won't pass the first time, so it gives you a good head start. A lot of people think, well, I'll do it after I graduate. But by then, you better have found something else to do, because it's going to take a year and a half to get in anyway, because the process, and that's if you pass. Question over here. You can apply really quite early, probably at least October 1st. I think you can start applying. I would say probably October 1st would be a good time to start looking at the website, because the application's open for about 5 weeks, I think, 4 or 5 weeks or so.
Why are these specific languages titled critical, or why is the government paying kids to go learn them?
Well, I guess my question would be, what other languages would you see would be more likely to be critical?
So we're talking the State Department's looking for people who are going to be able to speak these languages for future diplomacy endeavors.
Yeah, but I should put that with the caveat that you don't have to be studying international relations to apply for these programs. In fact, I was studying international commerce when I applied, which is sort of like international economics or something like that. And I was not an Arabic major or anything by any means, because they want various fields represented as well. People who will have a proficiency in a foreign language who don't necessarily want to go to the State Department. They want to work at a corporation, or they want to start their own business, but they need language proficiency to be able to work in that field. So.
What about people considering going into the arts?
What kind of arts are you thinking about? We had a fashion design major from Cornell on one of my programs once. She designs dresses and stuff. Swear to God, she's in New York City. She's a fashion designer, and she was learning Arabic in Egypt. Did you have a specific? Yeah, I don't think it would necessarily hinder you, to be honest. We get a broad swath of people, and you'd probably be one of the very few people who was a film major or interested in film at all. And you could probably, I would say you could spin that to your advantage and say, you're interested in documentaries or something, which would be, that'd be a unique application, I think. That'd be a strong application, because I don't think they get a lot of those. Question over here?
My understanding is you can't bring a spouse on the program, is that correct?
Yeah, if you do bring a spouse, she can't live with you. Which means she'd have to find her own place, and she cannot participate in any of the sponsored parts of the program. And unfortunately, you're literally in the program bubble about 12 hours a day. So you'd see her very little. And if she stayed in the city that you stayed in, she couldn't stay with you, and you'd have to pay for it. So we can't obviously prevent anybody from stepping on a plane and landing in Alexandria, for instance, but they can't come on the excursions, they can't be in the classes, they can't live in the State Department paid housing. So it's very difficult for people to bring their spouses. Sometimes the spouses come visit, but it's only usually for a few days, and we rarely even see them. I had one student whose spouse came to visit, but I never even saw him during the course of the program. Question over here?
At BYU specifically, like where you go to church regularly,
Mm-hmm.
would that be an issue at
Well, it depends on what country you're in, because in some countries there's no church to go to. That's not the case in Egypt, actually, but you'd probably have to go to a Coptic church. That's about. Is there an Alex branch, though?
No, there's no Alexandria.
So if you're in Alexandria, you wouldn't be able to go to an LDS church, because I don't think there is one. And that's probably the case, I imagine, in quite a few locations, especially Muslim-dominated areas. Oman, it would be very, very difficult to go to church, I imagine, in Oman. So that could be a challenge. I don't know. I don't know how extensive the LDS church network is. So you might probably know the answer to that question better than me. So, question up here.
Where's the Turkish program?
It used to be in. Let's see. At Antalya. It used to be in Antalya. I think it still is. I think it's in Antalya and Istanbul now. I think there's 2 branches. I don't know the Turkish people that well. I met them a couple times in Washington.
The Hindi program?
The Hindi program is in it's in Lucknow, I'm pretty sure. You can find all this information on the website. Yeah, I think it's in Lucknow. Yeah, question?
As for the languages, are there any that kind of come and go, or is it a pretty well set?
It's very well set, except for Japanese and Indonesian are almost brand new. Japanese and Indonesian, this is just their 2nd year. Unless Congress cuts funding, I don't expect any of the languages to disappear. Of course, Congress could theoretically cut funding at any time for any program. But since this is a Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, which is it's a tiny, tiny fraction of even just the State Department's budget. But if you compare it to the DOD budget, I mean, it's a joke. It's like kicking a rock in a gravel quarry or something. I really doubt it will be cut. Although the Republican Congress has made some overtures that they want to cut some of these cultural programs. But really, the overall funding involved here is very small. I mean, I don't know what I think I can't tell you maybe the exact numbers, but I can tell you it's a tiny fraction of what we even spend on, say, one fighter jet, to send all of these people everywhere. So I can run 2 Arabic programs for the cost of 1 cruise missile. I don't even know if I should say that. Does that give something away? We might have to edit that out. Where's Cory? Cory, you here? Edit that bit out. So, any other? I saw some hands, I think, coming up in the back. Your question over here?
So I know that you have to go to the Washington thing. That's required.
Yeah.
Afterward, can you travel?
Yeah. Once the program's over, you're totally free. In fact, we make it a point to say we're no longer responsible for you. So therefore, you are absolutely free in every way from our clasp.
So with that issue, getting visas to go to these places, how long do the visas last?
Okay, so I can tell you only in the case of Egypt. I apologize, I don't know all the visa requirements. In Egypt, a visa at the airport only lasts for 30 days, so that's not long enough for us. So we actually have to do a visa renewal process while you're in the country, and we usually renew it for 3 months. So you could stay up to 4 months in Egypt when we run our program. Other countries have different visa requirements, and some have to be applied for in advance. In Egypt's case, we just go to the airport, we get the standard visa, and then we renew it in country. Because Egypt doesn't care what you're there for. They don't care if you're there for tourism or whatever. They just want to know that you're here, that you're present in the country.
So with the Arabic programs, is the colloquial just an afterthought after 3 times?
Well, it's 4 hours of the 20 in class. But to be honest, out of class, it's about 80% of what you do. Because it's around you every day, all the time. And you can't really survive in the Arabic world without colloquial Arabic. Except maybe the Gulf. Yemen, Oman, Saudi Arabia. You might be able to survive on modern standard, but anywhere else outside of there, you can't live without a dialect. So.
You mentioned having studied Spanish first and then Arabic.
Yeah.
As a Romanic second language speaker going into some of these Middle Eastern languages, how did that help you in any way?
To be honest, I don't think it did. Because when I applied and finally got into CLS, I was already in the Arabic Language Institute in Cairo. I was already living in Cairo. So I got the scholarship from Egypt, which is ironic because that's where they sent me. I was already there. Question?
Okay, so you have to be a U.S. citizen, but you also have to be at a U.S. school. So like if I go to Europe for a master's program, would I become ineligible?
That's a tough question. Well, here's what I would tell. If you were a student who walked into my office at the University of Utah, it would depend on a couple things. It would depend on whether or not you maintained enrollment at the university. While you're doing this master's program, are you going to be maintaining enrollment in the United States somewhere or not?
No, that's what I'm saying, like if I study abroad exclusively.
That's a great question. I don't really know the answer. I think you would probably be ineligible. I think.
You got yours in Egypt, right?
Yeah, but I was still enrolled at Kentucky. I was in grad school.
So it was like a dual.
Well, I was in grad school at Kentucky, and I was studying abroad in Egypt, even though I was at AUC. So I had maintained my enrollment in the United States, and I applied as a student from the University of Kentucky,
So
not
if
from
I
the
got-
American University in Cairo.
So if I found like a dual program where
Mhm.
you study in accordance with the U.S.
Exactly,
but
yeah.
abroad, then you would
Exactly.
study
Like Georgetown in Qatar or something. You know, Georgetown has a branch in Qatar. You know, Georgetown's a U.S. school,
Yeah.
right? But you're in Qatar. And when I was there, I was at AUC, but I was really a student at the University of Kentucky. So that's how I was able to maintain my eligibility for the program. Man, great questions. Gosh. Any other questions? Question over here.
So if you were to get accepted into the program, do like Arabic, can you later do Turkish with this program? Or can
You
only do
could, but your chances of getting approved for Turkish are very low unless you've totally maxed out Arabic. Unless you've gone as far as CLS Arabic will let you go. If you do, say, like intermediate Arabic and then you apply for beginning Turkish, I can almost guarantee you won't get the scholarship.
So you could do this program a second time
In the same language, exactly. And that's actually more likely that you would get that than a separate language. Unless you've become so good at Arabic, for instance, that there's no longer anywhere for you to go with CLS. Then you could apply for a second language. Because they'll say, why are you starting a brand new language? You started Arabic because you gave up on it already? And they'll say, I mean, they've told me that to my face a couple times.
So you mentioned that once you get into the 5th year, you want to do something by yourself. So would that be working with CLS, like figuring out a program, or would that just be?
There's very little you could do with CLS properly because CLS just really can't educate you beyond about 4th year, approximately, Arabic, or any language. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't leverage the people you know, because when you go to these locations, you're going to meet, no joke, 40, 50, 60, 100 locals. And in most cases, these locals are highly connected in the academic world. At least in my program in Alexandria, we use almost exclusively people who work in flagship and work at the University of Alexandria or somewhere at maybe in Cairo or whatever, and they're already professors, they're already teaching somewhere else. So those are people that you can say, hey, what do you guys got going on at the University of Alexandria next fall? Can I enroll? And they'll say, yeah, come enroll in the University of Alexandria. Your Arabic's good enough now. And you just go and you become a student at the University of Alexandria. And you already know some of the teachers there because you had them in your CLS program. Question here.
Would you recommend, for someone who hasn't taken any of these languages at all, but really wants to go into this program, would you recommend taking one of these languages here before applying?
Yeah, if you can take a full year, you're going to have a lot better chance, generally. The higher you get in the proficiency, the easier it is to get in generally, except for, you know, the 3 that you already have to have 2 years of proficiency for, which is, I think, Chinese, Japanese, and anyway, Russian, yeah. Because all the applicants are already sort of have a moderate proficiency level even at the time of application. I mean, if you're applying for one of those that requires none at all, if you have a couple years of proficiency, you got a very good chance. Yeah.
Distribution between the languages, is Arabic, are there certain languages which have more?
Yes, absolutely. Arabic has 185. That's the largest, and we have 6 sites. The next closest, I think, is if you include Indic as a group instead of Hindi, Bengali, Punjabi, that would probably be the second biggest group as a group, Indic languages. Followed by, I want to say, well, it gets tough after that. Followed by Chinese, I think, because I think there's 2 or 3 sites in Chinese. In some of the smaller languages, there's literally only 20 or 30 people going, and you know, in some of those more obscure languages, and there's 185 that go in Arabic. So.
With how competitive these are, if you have like moderate proficiency in one of the more competitive languages, would it be better to go for like easier one?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know. I'd be hesitant to make that decision for you, but I think from looking at the statistics that I've seen quite a bit, you would probably actually have a better chance at applying for a less studied language even with 0 proficiency. I think, because you're just playing, it's just a numbers game. With Arabic, unfortunately, it's a huge numbers game. Your chances are 1 in 13, 1 in 12, even if you have some proficiency in the language. So, yeah, question here.
If they don't teach the language at BYU, so if I take a class in it, would like doing a teach myself program help at all in the application?
Yes, it certainly would. I mean, it's better than nothing. But the absolute ideal thing would be for you to set up some official, like an independent study. I don't know if you have that. I'm sure you must have that in your departments, where you literally get with a professor. Because I can almost guarantee you, and I don't know what it's like here, but at the University of Utah, we have tons of these guys that work up in upper campus and like medical and the sciences who are from all over the place. And you could probably set up an independent study with them to study their language if they'd be willing to do it and get some kind of real credit for it. Probably more likely to get funded that way, I think. We've got some attrition, so any other question, last questions? Excellent questions, by the way. And this has been a very frank session. There's been very little we haven't talked about. So I might have to get with Cory and edit the tape, just in case I don't want to get in trouble if I say anything I'm not supposed to say. But like I said, I guess we can conclude with this. There will be people from Utah who will go, guaranteed. I guarantee it. And there will be people, if you apply, from BYU who will go. So why not it be one of you guys? Because again, the geographic distribution requires that there be at least one person from every state because taxpayers pay for this. And you guys are already enrolled in the best school in the state for international studies and languages. So I think your chances are quite good. Unless there's like 60 of you at BYU that apply, then your chances might go down. Question right here.
So I guess they're seeing that we're here in Utah, not that we're from some other random state. So
no, I don't think they care because I don't think they. You know what they do ask on the application where you're registered to vote. They do ask that, and I think that's what they base the geographical distribution on. Are you registered to vote in Utah? Because if you're not, you might want to consider registering to vote in Utah. I'm registered to vote in Kentucky still to this day.
Or Wyoming or something.
Yeah, or Wyoming. You go register in Evanston. I'm just kidding.
So we might have more of a chance. So I'm from South Carolina. Would I have a better chance here or from South Carolina?
Well, considering you're a BYU student, probably here because you're not a student of the University of South Carolina. So I would probably say here, but I'm just guessing, to be honest. I'm guessing on that one. So, all right. Excellent questions. Thanks very much.